Hello and welcome to Insights from an Autistic. I'm Arman Khodaei. I am 26 years old and on the autism spectrum. Differences between high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome. From time to time I have someone ask me this question. And I made a video 2 years ago and I've been directing people to that video. However, within those 2 years since I've made that video, which is called What is Autism, What is Asperger's Syndrome, I have gain a deeper understanding between the two differences. It's an excellent video. I remember when I made it that I knew it was really good. Of course, let me tell you one thing, even though I know it's good, for the purpose of making this video, I have not gone back and watched over that video. The reason being is because my viewpoint has changed in the last 2 years, and I don't want to be interfered by some of the old, I don't want some of my old ideas being regurgitated, so I want to present to you brand new material. So you can watch what I said 2 years ago. Some of it's going to be the same, some of it's going to be different, and also watch this video. So the differences between Asperger's and high-functioning autism. So I have an autism diagnosis, and some people they'll have an, and so if you're like me, then the term for someone who has an autism diagnosis would be like high-functioning autism. If you like go to college or you're very smart, you can do different things, then use the term high-functioning autism. Now, here's an interesting thing. High-functioning autism is not an actual diagnosis, but Asperger's syndrome is. So I have stopped using the term high-functioning autism because a couple of people got offended by me saying that, because you know it's like you're comparing yourself to like people with like quote-unquote low-function autism, which is not the intention. It's just kind of to differentiate. And one time I had someone, a really mean cyberbully, send me some very threatening messages, and he said, "You're a fraud." You know, he said I was a fraud because I was using the term high-function autism, and he's like, "There's no such thing as high-function autism. It's not an official diagnosis." He's like, "I'm going to take you to court, blah blah blah." I ended up blocking this guy and reporting him to the FBI because he was just really threatening me, and I was really scared. I actually almost stopped making videos after that. This guy just really scared the living crap out of me. So it was a real bad cyberbullying experience. And so because of that experience, I don't really use the term high-function autism. Now, you can use it, even some people with Asperger's syndrome will use the term high-function autism. Let me tell you, you're not committing fraud if you say I have high-function autism. Yes, it's not an official diagnosis, but go ahead and use that term. If somebody says you're committing fraud, they're really just loco in the head. And this one guy, he was just so mean. But anyway, I'm going to tell you what the differences are. So one thing, though, is that high-function autism is not an actual diagnosis. It's a term used to describe someone who has an autism diagnosis who is less impaired by autism. And Asperger's syndrome is actually a completely different diagnosis. However, Asperger's syndrome is on the autism spectrum. So some people are like, some people believe that people with Asperger's don't have autism. From a technical standpoint, they're correct. However, it is considered an autism spectrum disorder. So it really starts to get confusing. In 2013, the DSM-5, which is a numeral 5, will come out. Right now we're on the DSM-4. And with the DSM-5, Asperger's syndrome will be eliminated entirely, at least if it stays intact, which I think it will. So the criteria for autism will actually change. And so there will only be autism spectrum disorders. There will not be an Asperger's syndrome. It'll all, and actually PD-NOS will also not exist. It'll all be autism spectrum disorders, which I am very much in favor for, especially because of this confusion. And the thing is that there are people I've seen with Asperger's syndrome that might be more cognitively impaired or impaired in different ways, but because they have fewer of the autism symptoms, they'll have like an Asperger's diagnosis. Or here's the biggest thing: if you never had a speech delay, you'll automatically get an Asperger's syndrome diagnosis. But there are people who never had a speech delay and who are very impaired by Asperger's syndrome, and And with that diagnosis, they practically have like autism, in the sense that it's just so impairing to the individual. So Asperger's syndrome, there are those who are even like low functioning Asperger's syndrome, and I have people go to my group like that, and I've actually seen a couple of times where, because they were so impaired, that they've gone back, and despite the fact they didn't have a speech delay, they've gone back and given them an autism diagnosis. In some cases I agree, some cases I don't. And here's another thing too. There are some people who get an autism diagnosis, because for like school purposes, they might consider it to be Asperger's, but the mom or the parent might really fight for that child, and so they end up getting an autism diagnosis. Sometimes the person will diagnose them as Asperger's syndrome for different reasons, but they might have autism. Now there are distinct differences, and I'm going to get into that, but all I'm saying is that it's really jumbled up. So there are people who have like an autism diagnosis and deserve an Asperger's diagnosis. There are people with an Asperger's diagnosis who deserve an autism diagnosis. So the two most common things, though: no speech delay, automatically Asperger's, and also if you have fewer of the characteristics, you will get an Asperger's diagnosis. And sometimes in life, someone might have an autism diagnosis, and then later on, someone might, oh, you're very functioning now, so I'm going to give you an Asperger's diagnosis now. Or, wow, you're really impaired, so I'm going to change that to an autism diagnosis, which is kind of really screwy. I have an autism diagnosis, not an Asperger's diagnosis. Some people say I have Asperger's. If they want to say that, that's fine. But I have a lot of the traits. The stimming, I had the speech delay, just all sorts of social disorders. I had monotone speech. I don't have that anymore, but a lot of these traits I've overcome, or they don't impair me as much. But I do have a crap load of the autism traits, or I did have a crap load of them, and so that's why I had an autism diagnosis. And so it is really, like I said, all over the place. Now, I have described to you differences between like a diagnosis perspective of autism and Asperger's syndrome. Now, there are also differences that I've noticed from individuals that do have autism and individuals that have Asperger's. So this is kind of theoretical, because this is from like my groups and people that I've met and materials that I've read. And so this is actually not scientific. This is my personal opinion. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that almost every single person with an autism diagnosis tend to care less about social interactions. I really do care less. I still kind of care less. I was really pushed by my mom to socialize. People with Asperger's syndrome, they have a lot of social awkwardness, and they just don't get it. And so they so desire friendships, that sometimes that desire causes a lot of problems too with other people. People think, wow, you're really weird, or they get a very bad vibe from that person. So a lot of time, Asperger's syndrome people with that diagnosis, they really, really, really want friendships. They really want to connect with other people. In my case, and other people I know with autism, there's less of that desire. A very interesting thing too, I was interviewing Jeremiah Swisher yesterday. He has autism, and in his interview he talked about how he wants to go into politics. I ran for city council when I was 21, and it's very interesting. Why do people with autism, why do they desire to go into politics when it's like a very people-oriented thing? That's a very good question. So I was talking about that people with Asperger's syndrome have, I think, higher levels of anxiety than most people with autism, at least higher function autism. Now, people on nonverbal, they can have a lot of anxiety because it's hard to express themselves, and there's a lot more going on. But I have observed in my groups anyway that people with an Asperger's diagnosis tend to have a crap load of anxiety. And now, I'm not saying that people with autism don't have anxiety, because I've had anxiety, social anxiety, all sorts of anxiety. People with autism in general tend to have less anxiety than someone with an Asperger's syndrome diagnosis. And also people with Asperger's, I think, tend to get depressed more easily. So I think people with Asperger's, they're more in touch with their emotions, or they're more emotionally expressive. I think people with autism, we do have emotions, but we don't typically experience that on as wide a level. Now, we might get very angry, we might have tantrums a lot, but other emotions, I think, are harder. I think it's harder for us to experience and express love. I think someone with Asperger's syndrome, it's easier to express and experience love and feel that connection to other people. So that's another aspect that goes along with it. Now, here's the thing. Some people get very upset, about people with Asperger's claiming to have autism, or people with high-functioning autism claiming to have autism. I've had some parents, like, oh, you don't have autism. I get that every now and then. Or I get that really big jerk who completely cyberbullies me. Like I said, I had to go to the FBI in that case. And because it was just very bad and very threatening, I was really scared because this guy was very scary. But the thing is that autism is a very wide spectrum, which is why I'm very much in favor of, in 2013, just having it be one thing, because we have people who might have one aspect of autism, that might have like a lot of this one certain behavior, yet they might be really good at this other thing, and some, and vice versa. And it's like there might be someone might have very good skills in this area and then be very impaired in this area. So, but it's like there's always something holding us back in some way. So it's so diverse and so all over the place that even Asperger's syndrome, it doesn't really properly put everybody into one place. Or autism, it doesn't, it's just all over the place. So saying autism spectrum disorders really solves a lot of problems. And some people are really against that. But, maybe because they have a child that is very impaired by autism, and so they're worried that somebody less discerning is going to get services when their child is so impacted. And that makes a lot of sense too. But autism is such a complex thing. Now, there are some other things to take into account as well. The autism, like I'm saying, it really is all over the place. And so you can't really, you can't just really say, oh, you're that, you're this, you're that. So as I'm saying, it really makes a lot of sense to just go by the DSM-5. And that it really does make a lot of sense. I know there are some people who are against it, some people are for it. I'm for it. I just prefer it that way. Besides, I don't want some idiots calling me fraud because I say I have high-functioning autism. It's really effed up when I have somebody saying, oh, you say you have high-functioning autism? There's no such diagnosis as high-functioning autism. That was a really, really scary time in my life. And it's really annoying. And I definitely don't want to get cyberbullied like that again. It really wasn't fair. And I have no idea what, maybe that parent had some child that was just so impaired by autism. I don't know, but it was one of the worst experiences I went through in my life. And so yeah, these are some of the differences. And it does get muddled up and it does get confusing. And like I said, there are people with Asperger's diagnosis who are maybe towards like the mild functioning autism, or in some cases even towards the low functioning autism. And there are people with autism like me who are very capable and doing very well in general. And so it is confusing. Now, my video, What is Autism, What is Asperger's Syndrome, the one that I made over 2 years ago, I do define these things a little bit better. That is what I have to say on this matter for today. I thank you for watching this video, and I wish everyone an awesome day of awesomeness. Thank you.